Howdy freeze dryers, welcome back to the Live Life Simple Kitchen. The holidays are coming up, and between Thanksgiving and the New Year and Christmas and all that stuff, mashed potatoes are always one of the main staples for those big meals. And that has really just got me thinking on how convenient it would be to be able to make a freeze-dried mashed potato that we could actually portion out and just have a rock-solid rehydration method for it. And we can also potentially use these dividers to make some cubes, so you can just take as little or as much as you need. So today we're gonna make some freeze-dried instant mashed potatoes. I'm going to start off with a 5-pound bag of potatoes. I actually like my potatoes with the skins on, my mashed potatoes. And then I also dice them into smaller pieces because they cook a lot faster that way, and you can fit a lot more into a pot. But I've been freeze drying long enough now that I've kind of realized that there's a couple of important things that I need to just start doing on all of my videos. One is weight of a product is very, very important when you weigh before and after freeze drying, especially if it's something like mashed potatoes, where you want to get a formula that you can just always use. You can pull a certain amount off the shelf. You already know the rehydration formula, and you're just always going to get a very consistent product every single time. And really the easiest way to do that is weight before and after freeze drying. The second is the product that we developed, the tray dividers. And I'm not just trying to toot our own horn here. We did this on purpose because we saw the need to be able to just create this, this formula that can be replicated time after time. The last thing that I think is so important is to remain consistent with what you put in a tray. To me, a medium, 6 cups. I don't do any more than that. I don't ever do any less. I fill the tray right to the brim no matter what it is. And that also gives you a consistent formula. And if you want a consistent product, that is the way to do it. Just 6 cups with a medium, 8 cups with a large. I'm also starting to notice that it's very handy to have a pantry full of dry freeze-dried ingredients that you can use for multiple things, whether you're using them in recipes or you're using them just as a side dish like mashed potatoes. If you can just pull it off the shelf, you already know what needs to happen to make it rehydrate properly. Now we're gonna boil our 5 pounds of potatoes. We're not actually gonna take this to the finish line and make mashed potatoes. We're really just gonna make a potato powder, and that way you can use this potato powder for all kinds of different things. You can use it for mashed potatoes, or you can use it for soups or whatever you wanna do. You can rehydrate it in different ways. After your potatoes are cooked, make sure you rinse them off before you put them in. I'm just using a hand mixer. I'm using as little water as I possibly can, just enough to get that texture that you want for mashed potatoes. And then once you have the texture you want, I would go onto a parchment lined pan, and really I don't know that the consistency, the texture of your mashed potatoes is really gonna matter a whole lot. It will to an extent, but I think once it's freeze dried, it's going to, really the texture is going to depend on your rehydration method and your amount of water or milk or whatever you're gonna use. So I'm just gonna go right up to the top of the lip. That way all of our trays are the same. They're very similar weights. They're very similar amounts in the trays. And what that does is make one consistent product throughout all of the trays, which is gonna make one consistent product when you rehydrate. So even if you don't have these tray dividers, we'll get a formula figured out for weight as well, and that way we can make something so it's like 1 tablespoon equals this much water, and that will give you, it will yield a certain amount of mashed potatoes. My 5 pounds of potatoes got me not quite 2 trays, and I'm trying to get 2 trays today. If you're planning on doing a full batch, I would guess about 12 pounds of potatoes will get you enough to do 4 trays. So I'm gonna make another 5 pounds of potatoes and finish out this tray. I'm also gonna take our dividers and put those into our completed tray. And you'll notice that there are some chunks still in my mashed potatoes, and you can see the skins in there. I think once those are freeze dried, I think they'll probably just turn right into a powder. So this tray is done. I'm gonna put a lid on it and we're gonna put it in the deep freeze. I think stuff like this is very important to freeze all the way through before we freeze dry. Before we go into the freeze dryer, I'm gonna weigh these before they are freeze dried. This first one weighs 2142 grams and this second one is 2224. And now that we have that, we can go into the freeze dryer. Please take a moment to subscribe to Live Life Simple. We do primarily freeze drying on this channel. And make sure you take a second to check out the new freeze drying cookbook. This recipe will be in there along with close to 200 recipes now. And I'm only doing 2 trays of this today because I want to make sure that it's gonna work the way I want it to. We're doing a similar type item with them. That way it doesn't affect our freeze drying time that much. Another great resource is our Facebook group and our MeWe group. There are tens of thousands of members on each one of those now, and just a wealth of information. If you have not checked it out, please do so, you won't regret it. And you can find that by searching Retired at 40's freeze drying group in each one of those. Now let's get back to our freeze dried instant mashed potato powder. All right, well, our potatoes took about 37 hours. That's not quite accurate because I did add some time because I wanted to get some sleep, to be honest. And I would guess it really took around 34 hours, something like that. We used 25.92 kilowatt hours. I'm really excited because I'm gonna use one of my new gadgets. I hope this works like I think it's going to. It's a thermal camera, but it actually goes onto your cell phone. And before I totally promote this to you, I want to make sure that it's going to do what it's supposed to do. But really, what's coolest about it is that you can set it so it will show the hottest part and the coldest part of whatever is in the screen. And right now, the hottest part is 108. The coolest part is about 69 degrees. The coolest thing about this, I think, is that what this is going to tell you is if there's any frozen spots left in here, and if there is, then obviously you can address that. But I really want to vet this before I'm going to promote it for sure. In theory, it's really awesome, and it's not super expensive. And really, this could be the next useful big item for freeze drying. But again, I'll check back. I'll keep using it, and I'll keep you posted on it. And let's get our after freeze dried weight now. We're looking at 1,000 grams even. That's cool. And then the second tray is going to be 1106. And look how cool those mashed potato cubes came out. That's the kind of stuff I get excited about in freeze drying. And I decided before we actually bagged these up, I needed to do this a couple ways. So I made a potato powder. I just threw it in the food processor. And this, you can see, if we can get a good enough close up here, it looks very similar to instant mashed potatoes like you'd buy in the store. And I'm gonna throw this as a powder because if we can do that, I think that the powder will probably rehydrate a lot better. We'll rehydrate it 2 different ways. On a positive note as well, we have been working on a new funnel that's proprietary to freeze drying supplies. That should be out shortly. We're kind of still in the testing phase. We want to make sure we get it nailed down. It's going to be much larger. It'll be a lot more stout. And then at some point we will make a stand for it as well, an adjustable stand. And then for a reference coming up, we're just going to do 2 cubes. I'm going to see how many, if that's just like a couple tablespoons worth of powder. And that way we can get the rehydration method for the powder as well. Ended up being just under 1/4 cup for 2 of those cubes. So 2 of these cubes equals about 16 grams. I'll bag these up in the Avid Armor and I will meet you at the rehydration kitchen. I also forgot to mention that if you are considering buying a freeze dryer or even a second freeze dryer, this time of year is the best time of year to buy a freeze dryer because Harvest Right runs their Black Friday sale all month long and it's $500 off the cost of the freeze dryer. That's the biggest discount you're gonna find all year long. If my calculations are correct, it should be 2 cubes should need, I think, just about 1/4 cup of water. So we're gonna test that theory right now. And there's nothing more satisfying than opening up a vacuum sealed container. So I'm gonna put 1/4 cup of potato flakes in one bowl. We'll do 2 potato cubes in the other bowl. I'm gonna add just under 1/4 cup of boiling water to both of these. And I just realized this is actually yogurt powder, not the potato powder. Give me a second. There we go, that's the right stuff. So that's pretty interesting. Here are our chunky mashed potatoes. This was just about a 1-to-1 ratio, a little heavier on the water, just depending on how you like the texture of your potatoes. I like them chunky like this with the skins in them. So I'm gonna add a little sour cream and then a little bit of butter as well, and let that sit for just a second. And our powder, which I really thought was gonna turn out better, I'm not really liking it as much. It's not really getting the normal mashed potato texture, which is kind of strange. So I'm gonna try something else. But before I do that, I'm gonna try my chunky mashed potatoes while they're still warm, because no one likes cold mashed potatoes. So there you go, and those are right on. Let's go see if we can get our potato powder to work. What I think is very interesting is that when those cubed mashed potatoes were rehydrated, they were about a 1-to-1. But the potato flakes, which would be the equivalent to 2 of those cubes, is about 1/4 of a cup of mashed potato flakes. They were taking a lot more water. I'm not sure why. So what I did is I got on the internet and I got the instructions for making instant mashed potatoes, and it has a 1-to-1 ratio of water and flakes, and then it also adds milk and butter. So we're gonna try that. So I've been playing around with the potato powder, and I've decided that I think that this is probably the weirdest thing that I've ever freeze dried and tried to rehydrate. It's extremely difficult, but I think I found the key that changes the total texture and consistency of this, and it's heat. I tried to do a 1-to-1 mixture, just cold like this, and then I ended up doing it. It totally did not work. It was real gritty and really just didn't turn out right. So what I did was I added more water and more milk, and I added 1 cup of water, and I added 1/4 of a cup of milk to this and a little bit of butter to 1/2 a cup of the potato flakes. And it was really, really watery, and I couldn't figure out why, because I had done the same thing the day before. The only difference was one was cold and one was hot. So I threw it in the microwave for a couple of minutes, and then all of a sudden it just turned out like it was fine, like mashed potatoes again. So I think for best results, you definitely want high heat. I would say boil your butter and milk and water all together in one pan, then add it to the flakes, give it some time to sit and absorb all of that moisture, and then whip it vigorously. I think you'll be good. And for a conclusion, what I came up with was, as long as you're adding 1.25 cups to 1.5 cups of some type of liquid, whether it's milk, butter, water, or a combination of all of that, that's high heat, add it to the flakes, you're gonna get about 1 serving, which is how much I have in this bowl of mashed potatoes. And this, even though you would think would be one of the easiest things I've ever freeze dried, is probably one of the most challenging things I've ever done freeze drying. It's really tricky, but I think that'll get you good results. A really interesting one that I wasn't expecting today. In the meantime, this is Retired at 40. Remember to live life simple. Catch you next week.